Hi, I'm McCarthy, and I help people with their breakups. And today we're going to talk about bad dates are good. We had a viewer question come in, a variety of viewer questions. If you got a question, send it in to writemac.com. Could discuss it on a live stream just like this. But go ahead, B. What was the exact question?
So he writes in, I've been a subscriber of yours for a few years now, and I've heard you say to go on bad dates. I've had a few too many bad dates, to be honest, but I really do want something serious. How should I switch it up?
Great question, and thanks for being a subscriber for a long time. But it's something I reiterate a lot because there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of high expectations going into dating, and that's where you mess up from the get-go, right? It's like you're going 0 to 100. You're already planning that this is going to be good, bad, happy, or sad. And sometimes people go into it expecting a bad date because the personality or something like that. And actually, sometimes you're doing that and you're just kind of getting some momentum. That's fine too. But why I say bad dates are good, it just lowers your expectations. And why is a bad date good? Number one, there's a good story to tell afterwards. Those are the best stories. When you go out on bad dates and it's a train wreck, I'll get into that in a little later in this live stream, some of the bad date stories I've had or maybe B's had, and they're funny. It's funny. So worst case scenario, you got a good story to tell your buddies. It's harmless when you go on a bad date, right? It's like, I mean, I'm sure there's someone that'll be like, oh, actually, I've heard of this one where I ended up in the ER or the hospital. Okay. All right. There's an outlier on this, but you know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. Like if you go on a bad date, it's not that bad. And people are like, what if this happens? Well, abort the mission. Okay. So, you've seen it in movies before where like, oh, I got to go. There's something that's happened. I mean, worst case scenario, you do that. Hopefully you have enough class, gusto, confidence to get through it. But really, is it that bad? So setting yourself up for like, if it's a bad date, it's worst case scenario. What's up, Mike? So Mike, go ahead and throw in. Have you had a bad date before? I know you have some stories to tell, my friend. It's been a while, bud. Another one. Okay, so bad dates. Another one. It's just a discovery mission. One of my other clients loves this statement. He was like, dude, I just call it a discovery mission. Now it's like, if you go out on the date and it's not good, it's just, you're just trying to figure things out. Is it putting that kind of edge before you go out on a date is ridiculous. Even if you think the girl's hot, or if it's a woman in this case, they think the guy's hot, whatever, you have this expectation, oh, I really want them to like me. It might not work out. You might not like the same things. You might be repulsed by the person. There's all kinds of things that happen because it's just a discovery mission, right? And here's the good thing. It's better than like when you start a new job and you're stuck because you can't just quit. A lot of times you can't just quit a job. It's like, oh, you got to give it a month. At least with a date, you're like, I don't have to give this a month. This person's a train wreck. And there's never been more material out there for you to search for red flags, right? So as soon as you go on a bad date, you're like, oh, done. Or you could say, that was pretty funny what happened, right? And it just takes the pressure out of it. It takes the pressure out of it. So I always say, go on bad dates. But the question that B said is, this guy's saying that he's having all bad dates. So when does it end, kind of a thing? Right.
How do I switch it up, or how do I change things?
Well, I mean, is it a bad date in the sense that you don't like the other person? Like for me, a bad date would be like, oh, for example, this was a way back when one. I've talked about it before. I just always remember this. I was young. I was like 18 or 19, right? Fucking over 20 years ago. And I remember I went on this date and went to Fridays. The restaurant Fridays? Yeah. They still have them in the States? TGI?
Maybe.
Fridays, right?
They were pretty popular. So
yeah, but at the time, people are going to laugh. But this is when I think I was making like $7 an hour, right? Like at a retail shop. It was a job while I was in college, junior college and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And we went out to eat there. So for me, it was a little bit expensive. People are going to be laughing. This is like 22, 23 years ago. But I'll never forget. We went out and she was cool. She liked me. She actually came on to me. But then we were like, all right, let's go out. So we went out and she ordered, I remember it was like fettuccine Alfredo. You're laughing right now. Do you know this story?
Yeah.
You heard me tell this? I'll never forget that. And I was like, okay, whatever. In the back of my mind, I'm like, it's $12.95 or whatever, you know, it's like in the back of the head, someone's like, oh, you're so cheap. Again, like I said, I think I was making like $7 an hour 22 years ago, right? I didn't say anything. I'm fine. Whatever, I get my food, whatever, I eat my food. She ate one bite. I thought that was kind of strange and didn't even eat the breadstick, you know, like the breadstick on top.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, you're not hungry or you don't feel good? And she's like, no, it was okay. I just don't eat a lot. And I'm like, all right, do you want to take that home? She's like, no, they can take it away. And that, I was like, I mean, there's some people that don't eat leftovers, right? Mm-hmm. Or from restaurants. Yeah. But I just was like, you're done. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. That's 2-hour wages, man. Mm-hmm. Looking back, it's kind of funny. Like it wasn't like I'll never date again, but it was one of those discovery missions. Yep, that one. Like, why didn't you want to go out again? I don't know, because you order food you're not going to eat on me. Yeah. Doesn't that just sound? You're like, yeah. I had another date. This was in more recent years. This was in this century. So it was like, same kind of thing. Went out to eat, and I knew this woman a little bit better because we worked together and stuff. And she was looking at the menu. And I was like, and this place is one of those places that had a pretty big menu and it had maybe some upper echelon things that were really expensive. Whatever. At this point, I'm not making $7 an hour at 18, so I don't care. I wasn't like, don't order this or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But she's like looking at me as she's looking at like the filet mignon, looking at me, and I'm like, first of all, I'm one of those people. I order pretty fast. Like I can look at a menu and kind of know what I want. So sometimes I'm like, are you ready? Like looking at the menu, talking to me. I was like, did you? And she's like, I don't know. Like, is it okay if I get the filet mignon? Is it okay with you? And I'm like, get whatever you want. In the back of my head, I'm like, hope you're going to finish that. I'm joking. That wasn't in the back of my head, but you know what I mean? Yeah, so, right. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, go ahead. But right there, I'm like, why do you have to ask? Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, fine. Okay. Get what you want. She gets it. She plays with her food, eats about half of it. And she says to me, yeah, my ex-boyfriend used to always have a problem that I ordered food and I didn't finish it. So I know I have to finish it. So this is a different situation where she's telling me I'm full, mm-hmm. which I'm fine. You ate half of your food. Like I'm at a different place than when I was 18. Right. Literally, the other one was like one bite.
Literally one bite.
Yeah. And like put it to the side, right? I'm like, don't eat. Like at this point in my life, I'm like, don't overeat because you think it's like you have to. That I don't believe in that. You ate half your meal. Maybe it wasn't that good or something like that. Mm-hmm. I still like the idea that you'd save it. Even if you told me you're going to take it home to your dog, at least, like don't just throw it out. Right. But the other side of this is that like I said, I'm in a different place at this point, years later. I'm like, whatever, it's fine. If you don't want to finish it and you're full, don't eat it. It's fine. Well, my boyfriend used to always make this big deal out of it. He used to always tell me that if I didn't finish my food, and I always do this, and I'm like, red flag, mission over. Mm-hmm. Here we go. Mm-hmm. And I ended up going out with her again because I like her and she has a good person. She brought up the same thing again. It was like she was scarred for eating out with men. Mm-hmm. She did the same thing with the menu, did the same thing. And you're like, is it that big? It's not that big a deal, but it's like bringing up your ex. Mm-hmm. Why does it have to be such a big production just to get your food? And I'm totally fine. You don't finish your food? Fine. Do you have any views on that? It's kind of a random thing. You take out a woman, you take her out to eat. I know there's this big thing in the States right now that there's women that hunt for free meals at high-end restaurants. Have you heard that?
That hunt for free meals?
Well, I mean, that's not the term they're using. Right, I'm using a little different vocabulary for it. Sure. But basically, that they're like, oh, let me go on these dating apps and I'm going to eat out 5 days this week and we're going to go to the most.
That's her purpose of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? Ha.
I haven't heard
ha. They have a chat like, oh, I went out, to Ruth Chris tonight on him. Ha. My point is, What would you think if you sat down, they order a meal, they eat one bite, and they're like, yeah, no, I don't want to take it home?
I always just feel guilty if I just did that myself. So I always think that you should just try to take it home anyways.
So if you were dating a girl that did that, would you be like, oh, no problem, it's cool, just throw it out?
I always think it's just, I don't know, polite to just, order or to get it, in a takeaway bag or something like that. But yeah, so
like I said, now I wouldn't read so much into it.
Right.
But to me, to do the one bite. So that was like a bad date. Yeah. Never regretted it. Mm-hmm. Kind of a funny story when you think about it, looking back. And you look back and you're like, I remember being like appalled. Right. Like now it's kind of funny. But there's also, if you dissect this a little deeper, if she's like, it really didn't taste good or it was really salty, then you're like, okay. Don't eat it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Oh, it tasted really bad. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. Okay, I can dig that. Right. So, like I said, when you get into these bad dates, right? But this guy that asked the question, to get back to it, I've been going on a lot of bad ones. Here's where you go. Is it a bad date because of me? Or is it a bad date because of them? Is it a bad date because I'm too picky? Or am I just going out with women that I know I'm not going to like, that I'm just throwing darts, trying to hit the bullseye, hopefully with my eyes closed, kind of a thing? I think that would be different. So the interesting thing about that is that there's got to be some good bad date stories from it. But if you feel like, oh, I just keep getting bad dates, I think whenever you have something that's a pattern where it's just happening to me, remember this: you're helping making that happen. So there's something involved in that. Now, like I said, this random thing about the food, someone else would be like, oh, I wouldn't even care, man. I have friends that I know now that they don't eat leftovers. They're perfectly happy throwing food out.
No problem.
And it's not as big a deal to me because I always know it's going to break down, the ants and the worms and everything else will eat it eventually. But I'm trying to think of any other ones that were really bad. But if you feel like, oh, I just keep having bad dates, this doesn't seem like a good idea, you're a part of that. And I would say that even if you go out with someone you're not attracted to or it doesn't work out, you can still have a good time or at least make the best of it. Unless it's someone that's just a complete bummer.
I think that I've had a few of those where
Debbie Downer.
Or I've gone on dates where I wasn't like crazy attracted to somebody, and I think my expectations were a lot lower then, and they actually were good dates. Like we had a really good time.
All right, take me from the top. What happened?
There wasn't anything like crazy that happened. I just wasn't like, oh, this is, I wasn't like, this is, a 10. Like
so your expectations being lower is actually a good thing.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like,
so if you weren't attracted to them, what did you go out with them for?
Like there was, some chemistry there probably, but maybe I wasn't physically attracted to her as much as,
as much as you would. So you're like, so you were doing her a favor?
No, I mean, I was still like, oh, it might be fun to go out and whatever, but yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah.
You might be surprised.
I was surprised. I think that's the thing. I was surprised. I was like, oh, actually, we had a good time. It was fun.
Good personality. Anyone else have a really bad date they want to share? I mean, one of the worst. I've talked about this on a live stream before. I don't know if I ever told you this one, P.
I don't know.
It wasn't really a date. It was a woman, excuse me. She was like in her, this is before I moved to Thailand, late 20s. And we went out a couple times and I was still like post breakup, missing ex kind of a place, but I was willing to go on bad dates. Right. We went out and a friend told me that she liked me. We had known each other from years prior. And I thought she was cute. She had a cool personality. I didn't know her that well yet. So we went out a couple times and it was cool, but like I was just in a place where, like I said, it was still like the breakup blues a little bit, but I did fight through and have a good date, but we didn't hook up. I think we didn't hook up. Like, it was like we went out once or twice, but she just did a lot of talking. And that's how I know I'm down, when I don't talk a lot myself. And I remember one of the things that she had was like, she'd talk about her ex quite a bit, which was annoying because it seemed like she was still into him. And then the other thing was she'd talk about like wanting to have kids. And I was like, I don't even have a boyfriend. This is a little bit of a red flag, right? If we hooked up. And ironically, about 2 years later, she got pregnant by a random. So it was on her radar. She was like talking about living in certain areas that would have good school districts for kids. No boyfriend.
Wow.
Like
the first
few
dates, she busted.
We just had a big conversation, right? Like even though I wasn't talking a lot, I was listening, and we were talking about different things, and I remember that. But I went to her house one time, and I think she needed to borrow like a ladder. It sounds so random. Look at your face. Like it was literally something like that. She's like, I'm doing some painting right now.
Do you have a ladder?
Yeah, no, she saw it at my house, and I was like, yeah, I can bring it by. It was like a Sunday. And so I go over there, and we're talking, and she invites me over, and da-da-da. And she goes in the other room. I go and use the bathroom, and there's a freshly used condom that looks like, I mean, it was a fresh, when I say fresh, the garbage bag only had one item in it, which was a condom. If that makes sense. So it wasn't like you had to look deep with the wrapper and like, whole like plugged up, like, and he looked down. I was like, what the fuck? And she was like, oh yeah, da-da-da. And she's talking to me in the kitchen. I'm like, damn, dude, you just invited me over. Done. You know what I mean? I was like,
yeah. And
then she was talking like, oh, I just saw so and so, the ex-boyfriend. I'm like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You think she had any idea about that? It didn't. And here's the funny thing. Great story. It wasn't something like afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, what did I do?
Did she get the ladder though?
I left the ladder with her. I never got it back. It wasn't an expensive ladder or anything like that. I didn't care. I didn't storm out or anything. I hung out for a little bit, and I was just like, no problem. Like I said, years later, Sabina says, I remember this scary story. Yeah, I was going to say, I've told it before. Yeah.
I'd never heard that one. I didn't hear that.
Oh, man. It's first class, man. First class.
But she didn't even realize. And
there's some guys who'd be like, do you know that there's a condom in your bathroom or something? I was like, no, whatever, dude. I know what you're looking for. And like I said, she got pregnant. She had a kid out of wedlock a year or two later. And I was like, that's exactly what she was looking for.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on a sec. We're talking about bad dates. So if anyone has a really bad date they want to share, let me know. Clutch has had a few bad dates. Man, it's late for some of these people out there, huh? I thought that, geez. The ladder. You can always buy a new one at home at the thing. So it's funny because B doesn't have any bad dates in his history.
I have a few.
You don't want to tell about them?
I mean, there weren't anything crazy, like crazy stories, but like, I don't know, stuff that I did. I can think of like where I spilled a bunch of stuff. Like we went to sushi and I have like, stuff on my white shirt and I just feel like awkward the whole night. And,
I really messed up. I'm sorry. Yeah. It's funny because I often tell people like spill a drink. Go on bad dates, spill a drink. Because I mean it in the way that, what if you spill a drink? But I remember thinking about that like 20, 21, 20. Yeah, I went to visit this girl that was in a college town far, far away from my house. And we had went out a few times and done whatnot. And she just ended up being a total, I'm not going to use the right word here, so I'm just going to let you guys figure it out. And she was a little mentally challenged as far, like this was before everyone was like, oh, I have depression, I have anxiety. Like 20 years ago, people didn't really like
say so.
Yeah, no one would go, oh, I'm bipolar or I have depression. And I'm not being unsensitive to that. I know a lot of people are like, but it just wasn't common.
Right.
So she was like, oh, like I had to, this was where I went wrong. I stayed with her. So we had only hung out, like we knew each other through mutual friends, but I was going to stay at her house. And then like, just from the first day, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be, and she was like, I actually have like depression and stuff. I was like, okay, I don't like, you're sad sometimes is what I thought. No. Oh, you mean that mentally challenged? I don't know if I
That's
said
what I
that
thought.
correctly. That
That's
could
what
be.
I thought at first. I was like, there's a few.
I don't know if that's. You know what I mean? That could be
Mhm.
misconstrued.
Mhm.
She was one of the, it was the first time I dealt with someone like that, and then I was staying at her house, so I couldn't leave. And I remember the first morning was like I was rinsing out a bowl, like a cereal bowl, and I think it was from cereal. And people might think this is crazy, but like at that time I would rinse out a bowl, I would probably just do like hot water, and I didn't use the soap like in the bowl because it was milk and cereal. And she was like, "Oh my God, you didn't," I was like, I was just totally caught off guard, I was like, all right, like, sorry, I'm pretty easygoing, right? Just like going nuts over it. It's like, I've never, been around a woman like this. I never lived with a woman. I was like 19, 20. Yeah, just flipping out. Yeah, just, like I said, maybe 19 or 20. Nowhere to go. I remember like I went for a walk. Like, what did I get into? The next 3 days were hell. I could actually probably put together a really good movie. We ended up like on a park bench one night after dinner, and she was just crying. And this is a major city. So like people were walking by like, asshole.
Oh my God.
You know what I mean? This is where people assume things.
Right. Like you.
Yeah,
you
like
just
I'm
fucked her over somehow.
I'm sitting there, and I don't, like I said, when I've never dealt with like someone that's like highly emotional up and down like that.
Right.
So I was just like caught off guard. Like, what's going on here? Sometimes I just cry a lot. Sometimes like balled up, right? Guys are walking by me like wanting to pop me or something. You know what I mean? It's like, fuck, man. Like I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And you don't want to leave, and that's my place to stay.
Oh, yeah.
By the end of the trip, she's like, maybe you want to stay somewhere else. I'm like, I don't have anywhere to go. Like, I'm just going to get a room somewhere.
Right.
So the crazy thing is, you want to, like, the city, I don't know why I'm withholding the city. It was Boston. So it was like, it was a nice part of Boston, though.
Mhm.
And it was like right around the corner from Fenway Park. So it was like near downtown.
Yeah.
And I don't know Boston at all.
Mhm.
Again, this is when I'm 19, 20. I didn't have like a whole lot of extra money.
Mhm.
And this was before everyone put things on credit cards. Like I never used a credit card for things. And I was like, so I was talking to a friend that actually lived in New York that was a female that was like, oh, you know what? Like, why don't you come visit me? Da, da, da. And I was outside the apartment, and I'm like talking to the girl, and I'm not trying to be quiet or anything, but like the one that I was staying at her house, it's already shambles. It's already a wreck of a story. I'm like uncomfortable, but I'm just like talking to my friend out there, and she's like, I didn't tell her all the details, but I was like, yeah, it hasn't been good. I started like lowering my voice, right? And I'm like, and she's like, oh, come to New York. I'm like, I don't even know how I would get to New York, and I don't have the extra money. I'm only here for 2 more days, whatever.
Mhm.
Like, so then like all of a sudden like opens the door in the hall that I'm in, and it's like, you talking about me? Just like starts flipping out. I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go, right? And like goes into a full balls, crying hysterically. I don't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I'm like, I was just talking to my friend outside. I didn't know you were eavesdropping. She's like, you were talking about, you told her everything, and you're gonna go see her, you're gonna go visit her. I'm like, whoa.
Like, this is way too much.
Dude, I felt like I was in Fatal Attraction or something, right? It was like, and we weren't really hooking up or anything. It's just like, but when I got back home, they were like, oh yeah, how was the trip? I'm like, dude, whoa. She had a hamster, and she'd just be like, come here. And I was just remember it was like, moral of the story, if you ever are dating someone or kind of seeing them, or maybe even an online situation, right? If you're going to meet them, and don't stay with them. So that was more than just a date. That was a scenario it was hellish. And I just felt like I was in a movie where I'm like, hey man, I don't want to play this part. Like, got the wrong guy here. And it's funny because when you're not there emotionally, like with emotionally unstable people that are really high like that, you're kind of like, whoa, what happened, man?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where's this coming? I don't know how to react to this. It's like now, and like 2022 would be like, oh, narcissist, bipolar, like everyone would have like
labeled.
Oh yeah, you could go on YouTube and diagnose it, and it's like, hold on a second. Like, I know what you're going through. All these other, like at that time, like 22, I was like, this is. And like I said, when I came back, we had mutual friends and they were like, oh yeah, how'd things go with you guys? I'm like, train wreck.
Mhm.
Your friend's
Right.
bizarre.
Right.
But during that time, we went out a couple times, right? Because with emotionally unstable individuals, sometimes there's this high and low where you kind of make up and everything's cool for a minute till the hammer drops, right?
This is
like,
great.
Have you ever been with a woman like this?
No, I've never been in this situation before.
Man.
No.
It's a great story to tell. So we went out and it was a group. So the group was like all her friends from college, like I want to say 2 or 3 friends from college. And then one of them had a boyfriend with her. And the guy that one of the girls had with him, like I said, I was 19 or 20. And one of the girls had like a guy that was like 29, 30. And he was from New York. What's up? What's going on, man? Like, he was really tough. He worked in the stock exchange. He had a Benz. It was just a different echelon than I was used to hanging out with, right? And he was like, all right. And I remember it was like, we all went out to eat and I spilled a drink and I was uncomfortable because of what had happened the last 2 days with these tantrums.
Yeah.
So I was already kind of uncomfortable. And this guy was like, so I knock over the drink and then like, this guy was like, oh, what the fuck? Like this guy, look at this fucking kid, get it together, man. I was just like, I don't know him. Right. Like, all right, and then like knocked over my food a little bit. It just felt like one thing after another. But again, I couldn't leave. You know what I mean? So it was like, that was probably one of those worst situations. And you just chalk that up to being young, right? But the circumstances were, you can't just get out of it. Where you have a bad date, you can just leave.
Just end it. Okay.
You certainly don't want to go out with a mixed bag of group your first time too. Like it's like all her friends.
Oh yeah.
And you don't know the friends. Come on, man. So there's a few there. Why? He said, not sure they are really PG.
Oh, his stories. His bad dates.
That's more than controlling. That's bad parenting relationship. She has a role of angry mom. What's up, JB? Justin Brown?
Justin Brown.
Oh, you mean that mentally challenged?
Roller girl.
I would say, though, in the end, that's just a great way that I just displayed of how great it is later on to just tell some of these kind of funny stories of when you go on a bad date. There's a great Laffy Quince says, when we date with someone, we will know by ourselves that person going to fit you or not. Actually, you can be fooled. You can absolutely be fooled on a first or second or third date.
Oh, yeah, early on.
And you can actually be fooled by appearance. Because especially men, they kind of let things go if the woman's good looking. No problem, little lie, bro. Trust your instinct. All bad dates, you have to go through it and learn from it what you want, what you don't want. When you see it for what it is, you won't walk, you'll run away. Absolutely. Roller girls on deck. Right on. I'm sure Roller Girls had a few bad dates. And the amount of clients I've had where they're in a breakup and they've had, I think some of the worst ones is when people show up when their ex is dating someone else and they're like, I went to the restaurant.
Oh, and like saw. Yeah.
I'm like, you went there? Yeah, I went. Why'd you go? I needed to confront him. It's like, so what happened? Oh, I knew he was dating so-and-so. It's like, so what did you expect to happen? No, I needed to confront him. I needed to say, like, I know.
I know.
Yeah. Have you ever been confronted like that? You wouldn't tell anyways if it was true. Roller Girl's like, I've had some bad ones. I'm trying to think if there's any other good ones. Great stories because of the good dates that you've had. You don't go and tell your buddies like, oh, it was, it was rose petals and wine glasses. We were on the beach and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I think that in the 80s, it was cool to be romantic.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at movies and music,
and
music,
for sure. Yeah.
it's like I love 70s and 60s music. There's just a totally different theme to that music. And like 80s, it seems like it was like cool to be romantic and do candles and do wine and do those kinds of things. And I'm like, I feel like now it's like, who does that?
Right.
Who does romantic stuff? But I've had friends before that are like, I'm actually really romantic. And I'm like, oh God.
Like over the top.
I don't know, but
maybe
it's like actually at the heart, I'm a romantic. I'm like, one of my friends is like a contractor, does that kind of work and stuff. And you wouldn't know it from him. And he's not very good with women because he's got some issues and some insecurities and some different things. I won't get into all that, but he thinks it's just kind of bad luck, but it's actually bad form. But when he told me that, I was just kind of like, really? He's like, actually, yeah. It's like I'm a closet romantic. It's like, how's it working, dude? He talked about himself all night. That is a big one.
Yeah. Or like you said, I had a few that talked about their exes on the first date. That was
I had a date that was so bad I pretended to be sick. Then I bumped into her later that night at the bar, made up a story that I felt better after. I took a nap. She didn't buy it. So cool. That's a great story to tell.
She didn't buy it.
Have you had a semi-bad date that ended up being a woman that you ended up being okay with? Where the first time you went out?
Yeah, like one of them, I said I was like spilling stuff all over the place, like on me, but it actually like we ended up seeing each other for a few months.
It sounds like a romantic comedy.
Yeah, like where I thought, like, oh my God, like what was I doing on the first date? I was young, whatever. And yeah,
it was so cute when you spilled that sake all over you.
Yeah, or you thinking like, oh God, this is going horribly, but yeah, it worked out.
That's what I mean. Like if you spill a drink and you can act cool about it, it can be endearing. Where that story I was telling before, where we already had I was just uncomfortable. She's got a friend of a friend there. And looking back, I would handle that situation totally different. I would be like, fine, whatever. You can get cleaned up. It's a little fly. Skinner, what's your worst date? I got a call in 10 minutes.
We could get a few bad dates in 10 minutes.
Bad dates are great stories. I mean, like I said, who wants to mention a good date? Guys are... And that's the way to do it. You just got to, I guess you could pretend to get out of it.
If it's that bad, yeah. Make up something.
I've had one that, I wouldn't say it was a bad date at all, but it was just a huge red flag where it was, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and they went to the bathroom for 10 minutes and then just put on like a pound of white makeup, like white powder makeup.
And they came back and you're like.
And I'm like, I guess we're not going out again.
Well, that was a big one for you. I remember.
I just don't like, I mean, it's like, yeah. But it wasn't bad, but you're in the back of your head, you're like, really? And that woman was like, months later, I ran into her. She's like, I thought you were going to call me. And I was like, to be honest with you, you just put on too much makeup. And she's like, and I'm like, no, I'm serious. You want me to tell you the truth? Like, honestly, I don't like it. I think you're a cute girl. The fact that you need to put on that much more while we're at the restaurant and take 10 minutes, I don't like it. It's like, oh, okay. Is that messed up? Or would you rather be told the truth? Because like I said, it's like, no, I'm telling you the truth. That's why I didn't call you back.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, different people will take it different ways. I don't know. That was honest. I like it.
Could you handle it? Like if they told you something, like, because that's not something personal towards your look. It's like, oh, I don't like your nose, or I don't like your look, or I don't like this, right? If you say like, that's a habit.
Well, I think if you would ask me maybe in like high school or early 20s, maybe I would have taken it differently. But I think I've grown pretty,
Yeah.
comfortable with myself. So
I think it's better to say that because it's like, why didn't you call? It's like, I'm actually telling you the truth. I know it sounds like a cute joke, but you were wearing like way too much makeup. You went to the bathroom twice, and each time it was an extra layer of white powder, and it was just,
it's too much.
You just changed character. I didn't like it, so I was like, I'm not gonna go out with someone that has a makeup addiction.
That's a new one. I've never heard of that.
It's out there.
It's out there though, I'm sure. Yeah.
The problem with heavy makeup is you're dating multiple people. It's like, who am I seeing today? Right? It's like, don't touch my face, because it's like, don't worry, hun. Truth is best.
Maybe she likes the white color.
No problem.
Just not for Mac. That's all.
No problem. I'm not saying that you shouldn't wear makeup. I'm just saying that that's something that is a major turnoff for me. Right? And where does it end? It's like when you go out to eat every time, it's like, okay, you're going to have to, you sure that white powder was makeup? I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about makeup to
Maybe she's doing lines.
Disciple. No, it definitely wasn't that. Definitely wasn't that. I've never.
She was trying to get hyped for the date. She was doing some lines.
I think the worst thing, it's not even a necessarily a bad date though. Like, I think the worst thing is, and this has happened to me, where your girlfriend or the girl you're dating gets drunk and you're in a public scene and gets a little flirtatious.
Oh, flirtatious.
Or you're in a public scene, like you're at a club or a bar, so she's getting hit on, or there's guys around, right. And she's not necessarily going in the back room or anything like that, but she likes the attention. And you're like, you can catch it all, and it's like, oh hi, oh yeah, what's your name again? Oh yeah, hey, Mac, this is John. I just met. Yeah, I fucking saw John talking to you and looking at you from like in my head. But you're like, and he's like, hey, what's up? Yeah, it's all right. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's one of those ones, and like, where's it end? But that's where you're like, to be honest, it's always surprises me when guys are like, hang out with their girlfriend at a bar or a club once they're together.
Yeah, when you're together,
it just puts you in a bad position. Yeah. It just puts you in a bad position. I know that, we just meet our friends. It's like, you're still fishing. Even if you're like, let's say you're the guy and there's a really hot chick that's checking you out, and you're like, and she comes over to you and you used to know her, whatever. You're just putting yourself in bad scenarios. That's all. But I never really liked
that scene.
I just didn't like. Yeah, I never liked nightclubs or bars. I went to a lot because that's what you do when you're in your 20s. It's like, yeah, it's what you do on the weekends. Yeah. But I remember friends that would be like, how many numbers or those kinds of things. It was. I didn't like those scenes that much. Cigarette kisses. Yeah. I don't smoke cigarettes, but remember we were talking about that. Just remember that happened to me a couple of times where you hook up and it's like, I guess he smokes cigarettes. Ew.
If you're not a smoker, yeah.
All right, folks, it's been good. I just want to touch base here and get one in, whatever that means. But go ahead and post in the comments if you've had a bad date before and if they're good or not. And I certainly think they're good for a story or two. And I think looking at it that way makes it easier, because when you have the good ones, you're like, oh wow. And really, how many really good dates have you had where you're like, oh, it was just perfect? Have you had a date where you just planned everything right and it was really romantic or anything?
Really?
I had some clients recently that they follow Corey Wayne quite a bit, and they say that they set up dates with, like, we went and played darts, then we went canoeing, then we went to the museum. I'm like, damn, dude, that's pretty intricate.
Darts, canoeing. Okay, yeah.
You always lead to the next thing. And I've done that by chance. I've never planned it that way, but that seems like the best way to do it is if it's a good one, like you have somewhere else to go. All right, folks, take care. It's been good.
See you guys.